Welcome to Daily Mirror Online. We are reaching out to you with another exclusive discussion. And today's conversation is going to be woven around the most discussed matter of the year, and that is COVID-19. But to bring some fresh perspective onto the table as to how corporate practices, societal practices, and business ecosystems could change and adapt to this fluctuating environment. And to talk more about it, we have with us the CEO of the carbon consulting company, Sanith de Silva Wijeratne with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Before we dive into the crux of what this discussion is all about, let's talk a little bit about your company.
All right, so we were founded just over 10 years ago. We are what we call a social enterprise. So we're not an NGO, we're an actual for-profit company, but we call ourselves a profit with a purpose company because our objective is to make a difference from an environmental standpoint. So we focus on the private sector and we work with them to give them solutions and give them roadmaps and help them to take the steps down the road to becoming greener, cleaner, more environmentally friendly, and so on and so forth. To do that, we have a whole host of, let's call them services or tools. We are really well known for our work in carbon emissions and greenhouse gas reductions and offsets, but we also work with water, waste, biodiversity. We have some really cool forestry projects. Basically anything and everything to help you go greener, cleaner. So that's what we do.
Truly, and with a vision like that, to be more receptive to the environment, to actually see how the conservation can go on the long run. How do you see this COVID-19 pandemic affecting the environment?
Well, a lot of environmentalists are now referring to it as the great human pause, right? Everything just stopped. And the results are very clear. I think we've all seen the pictures of the Venetian canals clearing up so that suddenly there were these pristine waters not polluted by speedboats. And we've seen wildlife take a break. And worldwide, we've seen greenhouse gas emissions plunge drastically, which has never been seen before in the last 20-30 years. So essentially, I think COVID-19 functioned as literally a pause button. A lot of the human activity, and most of that activity is stuff that would generate either greenhouse gases, waste, water consumption, all those things suddenly just went on pause. And because of that, we've actually seen the impacts that humans create reduce. And the learnings from that is we now know that these activities are causing this much pollution. So the reduction of greenhouse gases, the break that the wildlife has got, those have all been really, really great positives. And unfortunately, we are seeing some of that go back now. I think there was some stuff about Yala coming out on the Facebook pages. We need to be careful about that.
Truly. And also talking about how this is affecting the companies in Sri Lanka. Yeah. The pandemic is often associated with the negatives all the time. But from your perspective, what kind of a effect is this pandemic having on companies and how can they adjust accordingly? Okay.
So I think, as you said, the negative effects everybody felt, we have to stay at home, so on and so forth. But from a positive side, I'm speaking from the environmental sustainability angle for this. Companies were forced to do certain things that they didn't really want to do before. Work from home, for example. This is something that many companies said, we allow people to work from home, and we had these things, but it really was just a sort of a symbolic thing. You could work from home one day a month or something like that. Suddenly everybody had to work from home. And some companies found that they could get a reasonable amount of work done, even though 50% of their staff were at home. We are also now seeing companies looking at their office spaces now and saying, do I really need this size of an office? Can I not run with 50% and have 50% of the staff? rotation basis. And that's creating a whole new conversation. We, as part of our advisory services, we would always tell clients to don't travel for meetings, right? Not only just don't get on a plane, because sometimes people spend 3 hours in an airport, spend 8 hours on a plane, 2 hours traveling, one night stay for a 2-hour meeting. And we used to go and say, don't do that, do a video conference instead. And the list of excuses was, the clients don't want it. This is how we've always done our business. We really need to do our business. It's not going to work. So nobody was willing to do it till COVID happened, and there was no air travel. There was nobody going anywhere. Suddenly, we are doing Zoom calls. We are doing conferences. They are doing events. I know I think the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society had a meeting with about 3,000 odd people joining for the first time in Sri Lanka. So that's amazing. And it could have been done all this time, but it didn't. It wasn't. There was too many barriers, both I think perceptually and intellectually, technologically. But we found ways to circumvent that. And suddenly, people don't have to travel abroad so often. They don't have to travel between buildings for meetings. They pick up a laptop or a phone and have a Zoom call. And now, because of the virus, it is perfectly acceptable to do that. Not only acceptable, it is now being encouraged not to meet in person, to stop traveling and going out in buses and things like that. So companies are now being able to do stuff that, well, theoretically they could have done all along, but they didn't. But COVID has given them the reason. And the thing is, when you look at some companies and the way they have to travel internationally, that's a huge cost saving. Using smaller offices is going to be a cost saving, and somebody said that should impact retail space prices or building prices. So there are all these kind of nuanced little benefits that COVID has forced people to do, and I think that's going to be here to stay now. And I think the smart companies are the ones who are going to adopt those, and make them part of their lives.
Yes. And I think before during the pre-COVID era, we see, success was always calibrated by this extravagant outlook and expensive, measures taken when it comes to, sustaining and working in your businesses. But it also has a harmful impact on the environment as well.
It is.
So from, your perspective, what kind of learnings can we extract from this experience, especially for individuals who are running companies or stakeholders of companies?
I think somebody mentioned it in a journal. It's about cutting the fat. I know there were big groups of companies in this country who, when orders dried up, completely in March and April, they said, let's take a hard look at our business and who do we really need to run this? Do we need 10 people? What can't be run with 8? And we've seen, there've been layoffs obviously, but companies have come out and said, well, hang on, we are managing with the 8, not the 10. We didn't really need this, because when the going is good, you tend to accumulate more people and more premises and more offices, and it just snowballs. But when you have to really focus on what's important and what you need to get the job done, and you find that you can do with a lot less, sometimes in people, sometimes in equipment, sometimes in facilities, and suddenly you're still making the same kind of money, or you're still producing the same amount of product or the service and so on and so forth, but with less resources. I think the smart companies are going to really look at that and say, oh, I could have been doing this 10 years ago. Maybe I should, let's move forward and make sure that we are going to stick with the model that we have. And now there's talk of a second wave coming. So no matter how much these economies are going to open up, I think the smart companies are going to be ready to work and to produce and to carry on business in a COVID environment. So we shouldn't go back to exactly where we were before. We went through this experience. We need to be ready to work in an environment that COVID is an ever-present threat, something like that.
Truly. And as you mentioned earlier, this is important to kind of share the adequate kind of knowledge to move forward as well. And talking about the limitations and the successes, now it is a shared experience because COVID is not going to pick one person and neglect. So after all, as an emerging economy, it's a shared experience and we all have to be united in terms of bringing ourselves up and sustaining ourselves. And as a mediating organization who's helping other companies, how are you geared up to help other businesses?
Well, we've been working on with the private sector for about 10 years now, and as I was saying, a lot of what we've been telling people to do in the first place is stuff they're doing now because it goes hand in hand. Becoming more sustainable and more environmentally friendly is actually something that goes along the lines of being ready for this kind of thing. We've asked companies to test out work at home mechanisms, flexible hours, video conferencing, stuff like that. So we've been giving them this advice for a little while and not everybody's buying into it. But now people are. So I think as a company, we want to continue to work with them, in this space to continue to do the stuff we've always been doing. But we are also introducing some really cool stuff now that we didn't have before because we've seen the need. We're doing something called a plastic footprint, for example. So we are actually helping companies understand how much plastic is going into a product, into a process, and saying for every, and we trialed it with a tea company. So for every packet of tea that was produced, this particular brand of tea, we actually said you're responsible for releasing X amount of grams of plastic into the atmosphere. And the company said, okay, what do we do with this? We have to have a certain amount of plastic that goes in. So we help match them with projects that actively reduce like ocean plastic. They sort of segregate it and they recycle PET bottles. They use a factory that converts that into items of clothing. Now, so the company that did the plastic, say pollution, they're able to fund somebody to take the same amount of plastic out of the ecosystem. So it's called being plastic neutral. This was really cool. This was the first time in Sri Lanka we had done it. It was only 1 or 2 places in the world that had kind of done this before. And we are kind of leading that charge, so much so that one of the global standards then wrote to us and said, hey, we want to do this. Can we help understand what you've done? And one of my team members is now sitting on one of the global technical councils to help them write the global standard on how to do a plastic footprint and how to do what is called a plastic offset. So in addition to the host of stuff that we'd had and we've been working with for some time, we're developing some new things. Plastic is just one of them. We hope to be able to engage with companies, and hopefully now, having gone through this shared experience, they'll be a little more receptive towards making sure that they understand their environmental impacts and they're doing something to mitigate them, so that it shouldn't be just the random CSR box after. It should be part and parcel of their business.
Thank you so much for giving that explicit explanation on how important it is for us. And Sri Lanka being an island, being a biodiversity hotspot, I think it's important for us to rethink what success means to us. So thank you so much, Sanith, for bringing that new perspective onto the table. And all the very best with the future endeavors.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck.